Good afternoon. At this time, I'd call the Diversion Authority Finance Committee meeting for the February 23rd, 2022. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Here.
Mr. Peterson. Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Costin.
Here.
Ms. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Redlinger.
Here.
Mr. Steen. Mr. Pepcorn. Mayor Carlson. Mayor Carlson. Mr. Reeds.
Here.
Ms. Madriga. Quorum is present.
Thank you, Don. Second item on the agenda is the approve the minutes of January 26, 2022.
Move to approve. Second.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Costin. Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 3 is to approve the order of the agenda. It has been distributed to you.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney. Thank you, Mr. Reddinger. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Approval of the bills, Mr. Costin.
Yeah, for the February bills, the total of expenditures would be $7,920,271.05. Very familiar vendors on the list, and so nothing unusual to report.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the bills as presented by Mr. Costin. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please, Don.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Reeds.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item number 5 is the finance report. Again, we call on Mr. Costin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Page 17 of the report, I'm referring to the diversion fund, project fund 790, cumulative spend of $779,066,262, and in the administrative budget fund, total spend of $565,213, and then over to the right, the very rightmost column, $779,631.475 is the grand total historical spend. And if you go on to page 18, if you look at the statement of net position, we have a lot of cash on hand, and you'll see an accumulation of cash held in trust at the Bank of North Dakota. Those are all pursuant to the master indenture of trust, and so that those funds are starting to accumulate there as well for the P3 agreement. So our net position at this time is $101,139,233. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Any questions from Mr. Costin? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the finance report.
Move to approve.
Jacobson, motion to approve.
Thank you,
Mahoney,
Mr.
second.
Jacobson. Thank you, Mayor Mahoney, for the second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the finance report as presented by Mr. Costin. Don, would you please call a roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Reeds.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item number 6 is the Executive Director's Financial Report. Mr. Paulson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On my first slide here, I'd just like to preview this table. So this was requested as far as revenue sources for the program. So what we did is we put together all of the potential revenue sources that we have here at the authority. And then we indicated in the first column what was budgeted for 2022 and anticipated from each one of those revenue sources. So this will be a constant monthly report out that we do. Certainly open to any comments, criticisms, or concerns. So,
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman? Mr. Mahoney?
Joel, we made assumptions on the sales tax, and Ken Costin, when he came back from vacation, noted that the sales tax for 1 month almost doubled this last month. Even West Fargo did well. Do we recalculate, in a sense, our revenue then as far as the obligations over the 30-year cycle? When do we theoretically readjust? Or, I mean, I think Rick Steen's always talked about that. We have our assumptions of where we're going to be. But if we actually start to have some dynamic shifts, is that reflected in your budget at all?
Yeah, so the way we contemplate and anticipate excess sales tax revenue, it is all defined in the Master Indenture of Trust. And the Master Indenture of Trust will put excess sales tax revenue after the reserve funds are all filled up and direct it to debt service. So that would be the WIFIA loan, any interim sales tax bonding that we have to do during construction, those sorts of things. Once that debt service is paid off, however, then that sales tax can be contemplated to either be removed, funneled towards O&M. There's all sorts of different options that folks can do at that time. But right now, I think we'd love to see the debt paid off earlier, and if we continue to see sales tax revenues come in above what our financial plan is projecting, we will certainly pay off debt many years earlier than we would have, and that will ultimately save taxpayer dollars.
Thank you.
And I,
Please,
I
Mr.
also,
Costin.
Chair, I had a comment on that too. So I'm not the expert on the indenture of trust, but John, isn't it my assumption that after the state scrapes out, if you will, the money that there's required under the master indenture of trust, that money is then circulated right back into the project? They return those funds annually.
That's correct.
Okay.
It gets pushed back into the project fund. Keep in mind, I don't want to be the downer for everybody. Sales tax is great. More sales tax is great, but the money that's funneled back into the project during construction is consumed by construction costs. And so the more sales tax that you generate during construction, that just means that we have to borrow for less. We've issued the WIFIA loan. We'll have some SRF loans. At the end of the project, depending upon how much contingency is used and how much project costs are left, we have to issue anywhere from $80 to $180 million of sales tax bonds. And so the more you pay down during construction, the lower those bonds will be. As Joel said, you'll see those savings at the end of the project with the debt being paid off sooner, the way everything is structured. And so more sales tax is great, but because of the way our project finances is set up, you don't really realize that till you get to the end of the project. And that does bring huge value to the taxpayer. So, and there are some offsets like with the lands committee, you saw some of the appraisals coming back slightly higher for the lands. And so I think part of that increase in sales tax is probably due to inflationary pressures. And so how that all turns out in the end, we'll know better in 6 years when the project is constructed, because we have a huge amount of project to finish. We have the P3 bid, we have major components bid, but you still have other things that we just don't know, the unknown unknowns, as I can't remember which Secretary of Defense said that once.
Well, it's just, John, sometimes we like some good news. That's the only reason I was bringing that up. And maybe we should wish for cold winters every year and we'll have more sales tax. I have no idea, but thank you.
Yeah, I'm usually not the person with the good news. So.
Well, but Mayor, I think it is good news if sales tax continues to come in higher than projections and we either reduce or eliminate the need to do sales tax revenue bonds at the end of construction, because that just frees up and takes all that debt service away. So. So it is, and when you look at these numbers, I mean, that's fiscal year to date. You can see the Fargo sales tax numbers at almost $3 million for the 1 month. So definitely, increasing year over year and much higher than what we had contemplated in our financial plan. So I'll move to the next slide here and give a budget report out. Here's your level 1 summary. Not much to report out this month. Most of the costs incurred were either related to Fargo in-town levy projects that were basically just reimbursement for pay estimates on certain projects around town, and then the remainder really related to professional services, either on the lands program or on the engineering side. So I'll just quickly page through the level 2 detail, and you'll see under each of the broad topic items, most of the expenditures in January were related to engineering, legal, and administrative costs. And then you'll see here the in-town flood protection was the reimbursement to the city of Fargo for $3.4 million for a number of their different projects. So overall, year-to-date, obviously, we just completed month number 1 of the year, so everything looks fine budget-wise, no concerns. But we spent year-to-date $6.1 million, and total project-to-date $779 million. And this page shows my monthly administrative budget report out. So you can see I did include the finals for 21 in there as well. Our administrative budget was a bit under by about $222,000. So that was good, I think, and a lot of that had to do with just timing of hires and when we brought people on board. And then you can see our current year-to-date for our administrative budget. And that's all I have to report out.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Any more questions for Mr. Paulson? Item 7 is contracting actions. Again, Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do not have any recommended contracting actions to consider. I can just go into item number B, Mr. Chairman.
Please do.
Okay. So I have one budget adjustment to report out to the committee. What you'll see here is a reduction of $250,000 in the administrative budget for FY22, and we would like to move that $250,000 over to cover the consultant budget for communications. So Miss Amy Weiser-Wilson has been doing wonderful work for us. We'd like to keep her on through the remainder of 22, and this would be the budget allocation that would cover her costs for 22. So.
Mayor Mahoney.
Mr. Chairman, Joel, didn't you have a budget for the outreach, a separate budget that supported that? Wasn't that not necessarily your program management, but as I recall, Jennifer brought some type of budget forward to us, or is that different?
We did in 21. What we did for 22 is we anticipated what a budget for our consultants that were working on the communication side, but that also assumed a staff member at the authority would also be in that arrangement, and so the staff member at the authorities would be covered under the administrative budget. But since we're increasing Amy's responsibilities on communications, we need to cover that under the consultant budget. So basically, we're just moving public administrative dollars from our account over to cover additional consultant time, but everyone's spending the same amount of hours and time on it. So it's a zero cost budget change.
So wasn't your administrative budget $222,000?
We could pull it up here. or Paul, maybe you could help me out with that one.
222,000.
Well, that's just the administrative budget
me.
altogether. Yeah, so that's all of the salaries at the authority, benefits, office expenditures.
Correct. And the number that's on the screen there, that 1.255, that is a reduced number. The original budget was approved
Yeah.
by the board was at 1.505 number. So you remove that 250,000, and that gets you to the 1.255.
Thank you. Mayor?
But didn't you get salary? With the salary gone, don't you get the benefit of that?
Yes.
I mean, this isn't just salary, 250. This is, other parts of that is consulted work?
The 250 would have been salary, benefits, all of those sorts of things that would have supported that role otherwise. And so we're using that to cover additional consultant time that will make up for the time that we would have had we had the public employee doing the work, so.
Thank you. Do you have anything additional for your cash budget changes?
That's the only one, Mr. Chair, so that's all I have.
Don, would you please call a roll to approve or for action on the cash budget changes?
Do you want a
Whether-
motion?
Yeah, you need a motion as to who's in favor, if you're in favor of, please.
Move to approve.
This is the second.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded to approve the 2022 cash budget changes as presented by Mr. Paulson. Is there any further discussion?
That's all, Your Honor? No.
Don, would you please call a roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mayor Carlson.
Yep.
Mr. Reeds.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item 8 is, we have 3 items there. First item, there's nothing for approval, so we'll move on to B, which is the CHS and MFDA purchase agreements. Mr. Shockley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 2 items, both directly related to the same item. You'll recall back, this relates to the Red River Valley and Western line crossing that is currently located within the diversion channel right-of-way. There's a short line railroad that connects to the Horace elevator, which is owned by CHS. And so that's why you see on your agenda, there's an agreement between CHS and between Red River Valley and Western. You will recall that the Diversion Authority Board met in executive session to give us negotiating directions regarding this potential purchase of the property. That partially is why we have memorandums of the agreements in the packet. We weren't quite ready to have the entire agreement in the packet just because we're finalizing some tweaks to the agreements, and so we felt that just having a memo in the packet for each of the agreements would be sufficient. These 2 agreements together will eliminate about 2.25 miles of rail crossing. Part of this is that we're buying the Horace elevator that is owned by CHS, and then also the elimination of that bridge that would need to be built across the channel. The net savings after deducting the cost of the purchase is going to be about $7.5 million for the project. And so this is a very good development. I have to compliment Chris Bockyguard and Katie from my office that they spent a lot of time working through these agreements, and we're almost to the finish line. We did not want to put the agreements in the packet because we're not quite to the finish line and they're not in final form. I can certainly answer any questions that you might have. The first agreement is an agreement between CHS and the Diversion Authority to purchase the elevator and 1 additional tract of parcel of property. And then the second agreement is an agreement between Red River Valley and Western to purchase the right-of-way for the existing railroad along that line.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions?
Will they take the railroad out?
So yes, that's the long-term goal. There's a procedural process laid out in North Dakota law to abandon the track, where it'll take about a year to 2 years to get all of this taken care of. Joel has been having some discussions briefly with the city of Horace regarding whether or not that would become rails to trails and the process. There's a lot of additional procedural steps to work out, but this is a big hurdle that we've cleared and a success because it'll be an overall savings to the project and not having to construct that bridge. And in addition, with each of the railroad bridges, they have long-term maintenance obligations, and so we no longer have the maintenance obligations associated with this additional rail bridge that I think everybody recognized that if we did build it, it would hardly ever be used because I've never actually seen a train unloading at that elevator in Horace.
I'll also add, Mayor, this isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take about a year just to get the rails abandoned and removed. And then at that point, we would work with BNSF to actually purchase the underlying fee title to the property. So it's something I think we can think about what to do with that property ultimately, but we have some time to think about. We don't have to make a decision right away. So.
Move to send Chris on an Amtrak train to Seattle for all his hard work. Thanks. Move to approve.
For clarification, both items at once or separately?
Both items at once.
All right. Items B and C, which is the purchase agreements. Is there a second?
Jacobson, second.
Thank you, Dan. It's been moved and seconded to approve the two business items of CHS and MFDA purchase agreement and the RRVW Railroad and Metro Flood Diversion Authority purchase agreement. Is there any discussion? Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Reeds.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. I think it is important to note, both Mr. Shockley has noted it and Mr. Paulson, that the efforts of Chris Bacagard and this, Katie from Onstead Twitchell, and obviously Mr. Shockley as well as Peggy also, the work that they put into this and to get us to this resolution at this point in time for the dollar amounts that we perceive that will be finalized is amazing. It is absolutely a real win for us to move forward. So kudos to all of those involved and engaged in this process. Our next meeting will be March 23rd. Mayor Mahoney, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Bernie, you got to go till 4:30. I'll talk about some stuff. Joel, tell us the time. No, move to adjourn.
Mr. Costa?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. We stand adjourned. Thank you.